to infinity and beyond. Yeah. Is there anything else to say? It's always the question. Maybe silence is more powerful. I don't know. Okay, so get yourself a cup of tea or a coffee or a beer, and let's have a sketch together. The link for the reference drawing is downstairs in the commenty, texty bit. That's on my website. You can download that, and let's sketch like there's no one watching. I don't know what that means. Okay, for this sketch today, I was going to use my trusty Opus 88 massive fountain pen, but I've got flex nib on there that I'm still trying to get working right. I'm just not happy with it. Can't be bothered to change it, so I've got out one of my many trusty old Lamy pens. Now this one is a demonstrator. It's a clear one with a nice red accent on the converter thing there. And inside is this platinum carbon ink, which is the waterproof ink that I always use. So these are some buildings that I saw in, we were recently in Derby, and I just thought as a row of buildings they were quite interesting. Then there's a nice tree. There's some perspective in it, which is quite fun. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and sketch directly with the old fountain pen. So I'm going to sketch directly with the fountain pen. I just want to try and show you how I do that process, and to some people I know it's a little bit scary, but other people I know are pretty comfortable with it. So what I'm going to do is just put in some dots, and those dots will help to sort of tell the story. And again, I'm not going to be too precious about this. There we go. So that's the sort of curbstone put in, and then there's points of reference. We can go there. Now the bottom of these buildings are all on a similar plane, so we'll just roughly map that in. There is a little churchyard back here, and that has a low wall. I'm not going to draw any cars in this one, and within that low wall are these amazing trees. So even though there's some perspective in this, in terms of the obviously wide angle picture that was taken on my phone, I'm going to try and keep the verticals vaguely vertical. I don't necessarily want them going too wide, if you know what I mean. Right, so I'm going to put the dots in here, the proportions of these buildings. The first big building here is about, I would say, about 40% of the way across, so maybe somewhere there. And then this one is roughly half that, so there, and then these two get split up. Doesn't matter if they're too small, in a way, because you're trying to show there's perspective in this, if that makes sense. Now, there is quite a lot of perspective in the roof lines. If you look at the roof lines, that follow that roof line down, it will hit the road about a sort of that far off the edge of the page, so over here somewhere. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my pen top over here, and I'm going to, in my mind, sketch in a sort of line to there, and then I'm going to put in the next line higher up, and then I'm going to go sort of up there like that, and that gives me, it's not massively in line, but again, I'm not going to be too bothered by that. Oh, that's a bit of a wonky one. There we go. And there's a bit of perspective in there as well, actually. There we go. And then here we have this roof line coming up. Actually, no, that's the roof line there, isn't it? Yeah. So that's actually there. It's a bit surprising, but how home, hog's bum. That's sort of there. Right, so we've got those vaguely split up. Now behind us here we have this lovely church, which I'm going to kind of sketch in with a very rough sort of continuous line style. I want to purposely make that a little bit sketchy. And then coming down here, we have some other buildings. Right back here, there is... I'm going to turn the pen upside down here so that it's not quite as thick. I have another building. A little bit of street furniture, a little lamppost. Here we go. And some more buildings going off into the distance there. Right, so this tree is quite a big part of it. There's actually a couple of trees. So I'm going to do some quite quick trees here. Now I'm going to try and do something a little bit more sort of architectural, if you know what I mean, with these trees, like a bit more of an abstract shape, rather than doing, painting every branch. So if I look at the shape of them, I could sort of vaguely sketch them in. I mean, I know really there's no leaves on these, so this isn't necessarily that representative of what's there, if you know what I mean. Because this would be more like trees in leaf, but again, it doesn't matter, you know. No one is paying me and doing this for me, so I can do what I want. And when in life can you say that? I mean, genuinely, like, we all got to work, we've all got responsibilities, and I mean, it's probably just as well we can't do what we want. The world would be chaos, but you know what I mean. So there you go, there's that tree. Now, if I want to, I can put in some lines as sort of descriptive lines here. There's another tree in there as well, which I've blatantly forgotten about, so let's stick that in too. Now we have also some sort of shadow in here, because all trees tend to be in shadow at the bottom. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to sketch something in that. That's it. If I do any more on that, I'll spoil it. And that's in front of the church as well. Okay, so let's concentrate on these buildings. The roof lines, and actually there is some... Oh, there's a lovely lamppost. Do I put that in? Probably not. I want to put in this traffic light though, because that's cool. So that's right in the foreground here. I like street furniture, and I cannot lie. I think it adds to a picture. It dates it, which is kind of nice. Like when you see, I love it when you see old paintings and pictures, and they've got, old cars in and old signs, and that kind of that detail is really nice because it dates a sketch, so it places it in a timeline as well as a sort of location. That makes sense. So we've got another one here. You don't have to be too specific about that. You can be a bit abstract, right? So that's my foreground. I've also got a person here, which might be fun to sketch in. And they've got a little hat on. And they've got their hands in their pockets. And they're walking along. There we go. Stick him in. So I'm going to do these roof lines. There's a sort of double line that runs along the edge of the roof, and that is to sort of suggest a gutter or like a fascia. Now this one has just got a ridge line, and the reason why that's not got the roof on is because what they've done in that building is something they often do in Georgian houses, and it's one of those little random little things where when they're designing a building, if they want to make the top floor is normally got the shortest ceiling. There's the top floor, and what they'll do is they will extend the brickwork up. So there's the roof of the house. There, no, it could be a flat roof. In this case, it's not. It's a tiled roof behind there. And they've extended the brickwork up so that the house appears taller than it is. Now, if you can see, there's a gap there at the top because the windows are a bit lower, and that's because obviously the windows are up as high as they can go, but you can't put windows in here because obviously it's a window to nothing. So it's that style you often see in sort of American Old West, where they'll do a really big fascia to a building, but when you look at it sideways, the building is actually much smaller. The sort of makes it look more ostentatious and more important and things. Anyway, that's probably a lot more information than any of you asked for or require. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put in some of these downpipe type things, you know, the spouts. So here's one. And there's another one in the middle of these two little shops at the end. Okay, and then is there one there? I don't know. Can't really tell at the end of there. We have a bin. I might put the bin in. Okay. So here's the end of this. As you can see, I've smudged a little bit with my chimneys. We've got some chimney pots. We've also got some aerials. Again, to you, if you want to put those in, I like them. Well, that's to the fun. And I'm going to put a slightly thicker line around the outside of here and down here too. We're getting a thicker line there. Well, this building is really close to being able to see the edge. If you moved around a little bit, you'd see that. No, you can't. So it does look, I mean, you'd almost be tempted to sketch one in, but I'm not going to do that. Right, so let's have a look at the fronts of these. So about 40% of the way up, we have our shop front. And that goes slightly bigger because of obviously perspective. And then this one is a slightly taller one there. And again, this one is slightly taller again. So I'm eyeballing those in like that. Now, we could put the details of the shop fronts in, but I think I'd be a bit happier with doing some of the windows, starting over here and finishing here, because then I'm not going to be rubbing wet ink all over my hand. So I know there's two windows in each of these, and they are of a similar size, and they're quite hard up in that roof space. So I'm going to sketch those in, and they come almost down to the top of the storefronts, shop fronts. There we go, like that. Now the next ones, there is 2 and 2 again, but these have those big ostentatious lintels on them, which very dramatic. Somebody was very proud of those when this house was built. And the same thing again. I do have these little details, double details on them. Those actually probably could be a bit bigger. The lower ones are often taller than the ones in the story above. Now that again is a little bit of a trick. Very famously used in buildings like the Parthenon. Is it the Parthenon or the Acropolis? The one in Greece on the hill, the big temple one. Well, what they've done is when you first look at it, you think that all the columns are perpendicular like that, but they're not. What they've done is they've actually tilted them in slightly like that, so that when you stand in front of the temple and you look at it, it shortens the perspective. No, it heightens the perspective. It makes it look bigger, and that gives it more sense of drama and awe and all that. And it's kind of the same thing with a lot of these buildings. Is as you get further up, the windows get smaller, and it's a bit of a trick of perspective, but it's also sort of denotes a lot about life when these buildings were built. Often the servants' houses or the sort of minor bedrooms would be at the top, and the ceiling heights would be a lot lower. And then as you come down, they turn into more reception rooms and like family rooms where ceiling height was a big thing. You know, big rooms denote status. So this would be more private rooms at the top, you know, servants' quarters and things. And then further down, this would be, your big posh dining rooms and reception rooms. This street in Derby is actually called Cheapside. I've just noticed there's a lovely old sign there. I love these little collections of old buildings that get left in cities, particularly if there's like a modern development all around them, and you end up with this little nugget of just buildings. And also because they're concurrent, you know, they are over time, all roughly of a time. Anyway, I'm supposed to be drawing and not ranting. So let's put these windows in. So I'm going to do some dots because I want to make sure I get the proportions right in these. About halfway up is about, a third of the way up the middle one. So that would be there. And that one's there. And then actually the first 2-story buildings, windows are about the same. So I see I'm putting these dots in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with putting the lintel tops in. There. And then I can use those as a reference to put in those ones there. It's not perfect, but who is? I call these lintels. Are they capitals? They might be capitals. I'm sure there is people out there who will tell me in the comments. I hope so anyway, because I need all the help I can get. They are quite close together, these windows. They're probably not as straight as they could be, but as always, when I'm recording this, I tend to have it laid flat. Now, if I am drawing, I would normally be up like that. So sometimes I make parallax error in my drawings, but the whole point about this channel is I'm trying to model like a bit of a carefree approach. Like it doesn't matter if you make mistakes. So to a certain extent, a mistake is not an unhelpful thing for me because then I can show that. I can pretend that I don't go away and cry about it and blow snot bubbles. Right, so there's some bracing on this building. That's put in if the building is moving a little bit. So what they'll do is they'll put iron rods all the way through the building. And that helps keep it together. Now, I know you can't probably see this, but when you look quite close up, the bricks are quite small on these buildings. And that is often a good indication, certainly in Britain, of older buildings. Bricks got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger as we developed more and more cheap and efficient ways of making them. So if you see Elizabethan bricks, which are, obviously now 400 years old or whatever, they are tiny. Georgian bricks are smaller. Victorian bricks, bigger. Victorian bricks are bigger again. And then modern bricks, obviously they can be pretty much anything now. And there's also a lot to look at in terms of uniformity. Bricks that were made locally a long time ago, often in that town or, in that district, they weren't brought in from somewhere else. And they're often not very uniform, so you'll see quite a lot of colour variation, which is another fun thing. I know where I used to live as a kid. One of the places I lived as a kid, there was an old brickworks, which I think had originally been set up to build the railway there, because there were so many railway tunnels. I've always been really fascinated by any local history. I love looking at old maps and stuff like that. Always have. It always felt like time travel to me as a kid. Still does. I think if you can instill, particularly in your children, if you can instill a bit of a love for history in a dramatic sense, like big things happened here. This is sort of not hallowed ground, but if you go to an old castle, imagine what it was like living there. And we're so lucky in this country. We have obviously millennia of history, and there's a lot of benefits, I'm sure, in living in in the wilds of America, where you have loads of space, and anywhere in the world where you have freedom and lots of land. We don't have that. The UK can feel quite crowded, in a way. But what we do have is you've got to celebrate, otherwise you'll end up being either one of those grumpy people who does nothing but moan about their own country, which I just don't have the time for because life is too short. And even if I feel it some days, I just go, not today, I can't be bothered, stuff to do. Life's too short to be a moaning myrtle. But what you don't see, and that's the problem with sort of that mindset sometimes, is you just see the bad stuff and you can get caught up in that. It's so easy. What you forget is every town in this country, every village, with the exception of some of the very new towns, but I'm sure there'll be a village nearby that has a churchyard that's a few hundred years old. There's maybe 20,000 people buried there, There's a wonderful book by Bill Bryson, the author, and he wrote a book called like The History of Everything. A lot about history in that book, and it's a very positive book. I think it's got a great deal of a sense of sort of wonder about it. There's some buildings back here, and also there's also some tree bits. So I might try and sort of show those if I can. Or at least something into them. There we go. So that's not bad. Roughly sketched it in. We've got that looks a bit weird, like a sort of banana effect happening there. So let's put in some little dots to denote maybe grass or something there. This church is a bit lost, but I'm talking about churchyards here. There's one there. But anyway, let's not get too bogged down with that. Now, what I'm going to do is this bit at the bottom is actually paving stones. So I'm going to just sketch in some vague lines here to try and denote paving stones, and I'll put in a little bit of perspective. And that will help tell the story of certainly this bit of pavement here. There we go. So that grounds it a little bit. And we've got all sorts of road and things put in here, which I won't bother with. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly go in and just put a little bit more weight on some of these window frames, particularly the ones where they're turning away from you. And the ones where there is a little bit of shadow underneath. I think that'll help there underneath these lintels. That helps, because I'm not going to be doing a lot of detail painting in terms of those shadows. But this Lamy fountain pen, super cheap. I love them. They are not the most comfortable pens to hold, but it doesn't matter because you don't tend to be using them for more than an hour or so. But this is a bold nib. I really like the bold nibs in these. They've got a really lovely round bulb on the end, so they're very, very smooth to use, which I know is not always everyone's preference. Sometimes it's nice to have them that are not smooth, because some people like a scratchy nib. I certainly do with some art. Right, so we've got a little bit of shadow in here. I'm going to just put that in, and then that in. There we go. Try and show try and describe the shapes a bit in those shops. So we're not far off there. I think that's the rough outline. I think I can actually probably go in now and do some colour. Now, one of the issues I have here is I want to try and use these strong, bold colours. I want to try and show those. There's a green here, a bright green there, a yellow there. A sort of, what would that be? I don't know what colour that is. It's a greeny grey there. And this is sort of a blue. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to amplify those. That's going to be not a deep navy. That's going to become a poppy red. Well, no, I'm talking nonsense. That's going to be a poppy blue. This is going to be the green. And then obviously yellow and that one there. Now, it's a wet day, so what I'm going to try and do is show a little bit of the colour bleeding down here onto here. So what I will do is I will do a sky, and then I'll wet all this and let it bleed in, so you'll see that. So the first thing I'm going to do is a grey sky. I'll go with one of my little mop brushes. This one's getting a bit loose, which is somewhat of a concern. I mean, I have used it so much, I might try and drop a little bit of super glue in there. We've got a bit of life left in it. Alright, so here we want a bit of a grey sky, but nothing. We might go slightly more dramatic just so that we can see some cloud details. So here I've got some of this Daniel Smith Moon Glow, which is a lovely colour. It's got purples and blues, and it tends to separate out into lots of different tones, so it's quite good. I think it's quite good for skies, partially. Right, so let's splash in a little bit of water. I haven't hair dried this actually, so I do hope all the ink is dry. Here we go. So I don't know how well you can see, but I've got quite a lot of water there. It is quite big pools as well. I don't mind in the slightest. I'm still getting used to this paper. This is new paper to me. I am slowly getting used to it. Right, if you look at the sky in the image, we've got some bits coming out here. There's a darker area up here, but it's quite subtle. I don't mind some splashes. I think it feels a bit more free and expressive to do that. So now for the colour of the shops, what I might do is I might do the whole of the window frame that colour and then black in, and then use black ink to colour in the individual panes. So it's probably something like that. I'm going to go with that because I don't really have the perfect colour. I don't know how bothered I can be to get it. It's terrible, isn't it? It's a shocking indictment. So I'm going to paint the whole of that in, then I'm just going to do something like that. The yellow, I'm going to use my clean yellow, which is here. Quite a bright pigment on that. And I'm going to paint that in. Oh, the wrong one. Tissue. There we go. Dab a bit of that water out. Okay, so we might go... So when I was doing some drawing with the kids earlier, and they were doing some painting, I quickly did these sort of mock-ups. I've talked about this previously as an interesting sort of technique, but I've never actually done it. But here you can see, before I coloured this in, before I normally colour something in, if I'm unsure how I want to do it and I want to try some experiments, I will quickly sketch it out. It doesn't have to be on brilliant paper, and you can just do some sort of mock-ups. So here I've just painted the brickwork, which I wasn't so keen on. Here I've just painted the buildings and let the paint come down into the ground here. I like it. I quite like leaving these unpainted, but it looks a bit like the buildings are crying, and that makes me feel sad. So here I did a bit of let that come down. Didn't paint this curb or anything, and I just put a bit of a mixture of paint in there. And what I did is I tilted up the paint and just let it run down. So I think what I'll do is I'll go with that as a final one. Now I actually prefer the sky in this one to mine. I think mine's a bit wishy-washy. Hope you can see actually some of those colours in here. Some of the greens and the blues and the purples from the Moon Glow. And it is a slightly granulating colour as well. There you go, you can see here. I hope you can see that. So the mixture of colours. It's a really interesting sort of shadow colour, that Moon Glow. I do like it. Right, so I'm going to finish this off now and paint it in. So there's a few different layers here, a few different layers to do. So I'm going to use this as a base. So I think what I'll do is I'll put the orange in, finish the colours, and then put the orange in, and I'll wet all this. And as I put in those different colours, I'll drag some down and tilt that up and let it all sort of run down. At some point I'm going to wet these trees and add some colours in there as well. So should we give it a go? I'm not going to be too fussy about this. I don't really care so much about it being, hyper accurate or whatever. I want it to be a nice loose sketch. Okay, so I'll go ahead and finish. Oh, actually, I'm mixing some of this now, aren't I? Right, so we'll put that yellow in for the window frame there. Yellow window sill. Now this is yellow on the shop front. There we go. And then what we're going to do is just do that and tilt that up and let it run down a bit. Like that. There we go. Okay, so what's next? The green. Now this is quite a zippy green. It's quite a lime green. So, yeah, we can put that in. Actually, it needs more green. Yeah. Now, even though I'm going to go back in and blacken, tidy up these windows by adding the black in with a pen, or I can still, this isn't a limey enough green, but like I said before, I'm not going to be that fussed. Now these windows are white, so it doesn't matter so much about them. We still have this bit I want to pull in here and tip that up again and let that just run down. There we go. Now I'm going to tidy up just that little bit there. And then finally, this blue, this building on the end is really, it isn't blue. It's kind of navy. But as I did in the mock-up here, I've made it blue because I really want to give the building a little bit more, give the whole picture a little bit more punch, if that makes sense. Because that blue is so dark, it's just not fun colour. Whereas this French ultramarine is one of my favourite colours. It's in this sort of raw form, it can look a bit denim-y. It's nice. So let's stick that in. The colour looks great on this paper, I have to say. This is that Bockingford paper that I've been starting to use recently. So again, I'm going to just add a little bit more water here, because I think it's drying up a little bit and don't want it to get too dry. And then I'll grab some of this blue and stick that there, and then I'll turn that up and let that just run down the hill. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to grab some of this orange that I mixed earlier, and I'm just going to dab that in for, there we go. And I'll dry that brush a bit and just make that a little bit softer. There we go. So that's good. Now I need to splash it everywhere. Such a messy painter. These look a little bit dotty there, so. Okay, so now I'm going to paint in the orange of the house and the grey roof and stuff like that. But what I'm going to do is I might just hair dry that. Because then I won't get any bleed into the red brick, if you know what I mean. So I'll do that now. Great. So I think that's kind of captured the wet vibe of the street on a wet day in Derby. So really straightforward now. It's just a case of putting in this brick colour. Now I know this is, and again, it's probably a bit too bright, but I quite like bright colours in my art. Some people like using really muted tones, but that's the whole point of this gig, is you can rock it anywhere you want. It's completely up to you. If you like bright colours and you like big and bold stuff, you'll like my art. Now, if you like, more graphical, simple, black and white stuff, my art probably isn't for you. But that's the great thing, is there's always people out there. So I think about this a bit, like, it doesn't really matter what you make or what you do, there will be somebody in this worldwide of sports mad world that will like what you do. You just have to find them. Now I'm putting a tiny bit more pigment in, darker, picking up some palette goo, because as we get closer to this side, I don't necessarily, I just don't want it to be the same tone all the way across. I want it to have a bit of variation in it. I'm trying not to put any on these window frames. Now these wash types, what am I trying to say here? So when you're painting a bit like this, you really want to try and keep a wet edge. So you don't want to let any of the edges kind of dry off, because then when you go back and try and continue them, you'll get a hard line. So the whole time you're painting, think about where you were recently and make sure you try and keep that wet edge going. And if you do that, your washes will be nice and even and flat. I used to use markers a lot, and different times of my art play, I've used lots of different media. Watercolor is one I always struggled with, and it was only something in sort of 2020 that I really started playing with. And I have to say, it does have its limitations, but generally it's portable. It's relatively quick to do, and it's fine. Okay, so as before, we're going to blacken the windows. And we're going to put some dark colour in for the guttering and things. So really now I can just put some of this roof. Oh, I've forgotten the chimneys, haven't I? Now, chimneys are often a tiny bit darker because they are sooty areas. Well, certainly used to be when we had real fires. Not so much nowadays. There we go. Alright, so I might do another quick hair dry on that. Right, so you can see here where there's been a little bit of water sitting on there. A little splash of water, and that's caused it to bleed out. But again, I'm not being too precious about this. There's water all over this. As I often say, like, I tend to work quite wet, and it all gets a bit splashy, and I don't mind that. So let's put some grey there. I'm gonna just dot on, just to try and break up that. I'm just dotting in a bit of paint there. I don't want that to be too perfect a wash or too flat. That's cool. Right, so when I come to do this tree here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to wet the tree area in. And I'm going to get a little bit of green, and I'm going to dab it in. And then I'm going to get a bit of Van Dyke brown down at the bottom. I'm also going to pull up a little bit of this quinacridone rose here. I'm going to probably leave it vaguely like that. I might... Oops. That's a wee bit dark. I might suck that all out there. I quite like these contrasts. I like this green and this pink together there. Nice colours. They sit well. Right. So what I'm going to do is when that's a bit dry, I'm going to go in and put a bit of the shadow in for the trunks, and so there's some of the shadow here. But we're not far off being finished here. I could splash quite a lot of pigment over the top of this. So actually, do you know, a bit of green might be nice. And maybe a little bit of that pink, that rose. Do like that as a colour. Yeah, that looks nice. Again, so it's hairdryer and then final details on this. So weirdly, it's starting to regret actually doing this tree, because I don't know, I think it does tend to distract a little bit from the main bit of the drawing, so I'm really wondering whether I should have bothered with that. I'll just do something like that. It does tend to fight that, whereas I was quite liking this being like the hero, if you know what I mean. I've got a little bit of green I could drop in there. Yeah, I'll leave that as is, and then start to ink in some of these windows. Looking at the reference drawings, some of the windows look quite black and some of them are sort of grey. The ones further back actually look more black, so I probably want a black fine line up to that. So across this one there is 3 across the top. Four. Oh my god, that's insane. So I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do 2, 3, and then suggest 1 there. Okay, so that's that done. Now these have got 4 rows of 4. Again, that's ridiculous. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring that down to 3 rows of 3. And I'm not going to be too fussy about making sure it's perfectly accurate or anything. There you go. And do the same with this one. So obviously there's other ways of doing this. You could just ink it in black and then get some kind of Posca pen and maybe going over the top or something, but yeah, I kind of want to work in a way that I can easily transpose that to the to the outside world. And if I was actually urban sketching on site, which is the technical term for urban sketching, as I'm sure you probably know, I have a few complaints about that what I do I shouldn't call urban sketching. I don't really bother. The other thing that I've really struggled with is coming up with terms for videos. Like, what is it that I do? Is it line and wash? Is it urban sketching? Is it watercolors? It's quite hard to reach your audience in a way on something like YouTube, because everyone's going to be looking for different stuff, and the most popular searches, I don't know, I don't necessarily feel the most honest, if you know what I mean. Okay, so just to vary up a bit, I'm going to go in and do these panes with the grey. Sometimes it's nice to do black, and other times it's nice to do grey. It sort of breaks up that thing. So the same thing here. These panes have got like 4 rows of 4 or whatever. Now I'm doing 3 rows there, and I'm going to do 2 rows on this one, just to break it up. So there is a tiny bit of shadow under here in the tops of those windows. There's a little bit that runs along there, along there, along there, along there, like that. Got a little bit of shadow there, maybe around there, maybe running down this curb. I might just slightly darken those tree trunks. Again, pull them, I think knocking them back might make them a bit less prominent. I think we're done. Right, I'm not going to put any white highlights or anything on there for those. Don't think it needs it. So I'll dry it off and just have another check. And then I might put on some bright colours for the street lamps, yeah. There is some various bits of writing here. I'm just gonna sort of sketch it in. There's a lot. You could actually go to the trouble of drawing in all the signs. I don't really want to do that. Like that. No, the last bit. The last bit is a really... Oh, I've got a red pen. Hold on. I don't know, where is it? Oh, I had a red pen earlier. I've got some red in this. There we go. A little bit of red left in this Lamy. So I can put a red light in there. And there's that green that might... Here. There's that green there. It's a bit silly to put in, but there we go. So that's it. I'm leaving it at that. Let's have a look. I don't know what you think to that. I like these splashes here. These are fun. You can see once you get close up how rough some of these sort of windows are. It's quite fun. Sky's quite a subtle one for me. I normally go a bit bolder with my skies. I'm not so keen on that that bit going up there for that. So I might change that. I'm not so keen on these vertical wiggly bits for the trees. But yeah, pretty cool. So I hope you enjoyed that. Obviously the reference material is there. Do that, sketch along. There's about one or two more to do for my trip to Derby that I think will be quite nice sort of urban sketches. So let us know if there's anything else you fancy me doing and covering. And yeah, thanks for hanging on to the end. You'll get bonus points for that. And don't forget there's some of my art available on my website for sale, some originals. I'm going to be stacking up with a load more. I've got so much more to put on there and a lot sold. So you have a look at some of that. There's a link below, and then check out my socials and follow me and all that. And please feel free to subscribe to the newsletter. I'm going to start producing those soon. And yeah, it's all happening. So I hope you enjoy. Thanks very much. We'll see you again. Bye-bye.